First thing on our agenda is our Cushman & Wakefield consultants are going to give us an update.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Tidwell, Board Trustees, and Dr. Williams. So as you all are aware, the college is undergoing a physical footprint analysis. Back in August of last year, we engaged the consultants to help us with reviewing our physical footprint to develop a master plan. Since then, we've had several conversations, meetings with staff, leadership, vision meetings with our chair of the board, with the chair of the real estate committee, and several other data collection reviews. With that, we really knew that the uniqueness of St. Petersburg College was really not a one-size-fits-all approach. And so this really took a lot of time for them to really understand SPC and the specialized things that we do here at the college. And so since then, we have done some analysis on utilization, which you'll hear about today. You'll hear some possible quick wins that we could make and opportunities. We'll also look at some of the findings that we had thus far and the next steps. And so with that, we'll want to start off with our consultant, Adam Gogolski, and he's here with us to start us off with the utilization review, some of the highlights from that.
All right. Someone set this up. It was working a second ago.
Can we
It is
click
up
it
to
on
that
the slide?
computer. I can't stand there.
It is at the computer. Frozen.
Yeah, it's frozen.
Please enjoy this short intermission.
And AV was not part of our analysis. So. There you go. Great.
Great, thank you very much. Drop this so everyone can hear me. So, thank you. My name is Adam Gogolski. I'm with Gordy, and we were working with a team in Cushman & Wakefield. His name is Tyler Cornell. He and I worked together on this project. We looked at the utilization of teaching spaces, specifically at SPC, so scheduled classes, as well as some other activities and events that we were able to include against the room inventory. And so on this, you can see kind of what our scope of work was. We looked at 4 terms: fall 18, spring 19, fall 19, and spring 20. We looked at the terms before COVID. We wanted to get the schedule as much as possible as the way things kind of were and the way things we hope things can get back to eventually, with a significant amount of in-person teaching. We did focus on Monday to Friday. We were kind of looking for the high points, and then you can see the buildings and rooms that we included. We'll talk a little, as you'll see, that rooms number will change slide to slide. I'll kind of explain what's going on there and why that adjusts, but wanted to give you an idea of our full scope here. We took all of those rooms and broke them down into either classrooms or laboratories. The codification, 100 level rooms and 200 level rooms. And so we were looking at those rooms in specific when it comes to the room counts. That is not every room at those sites, but simply the classrooms and laboratories used for teaching. So when we look at the utilization, we focused on spring 2020 as a bit of a high watermark for in-person teaching, classroom utilization. You know, spring 2020, the world changed, but for the start of spring 2020, January, February, part of the term, before everything moved remote, we wanted to keep that in mind and use that schedule when we were doing this analysis. So on here, we have 2 different lines on the chart on the left. The room utilization average in purple So you can see the room utilization up there is the percentage of rooms being used at any given time, so across the day. The idea there is at what percent of total rooms are occupied at any given time. And then the position utilization is for those occupied rooms, what percent of seats are filled by students. So we look at these two together over the course of the semester. This is representative of the whole semester, and we're looking across the schedulable day. We consider prime time, well, it's 9 to 5, so that's what those utilization lines are, the average lines are from. The purple dotted line marries to the purple kind of EKG chart, where that is the room utilization for SPC as a whole. So on average, across the college, what is the utilization? So you can see it's spiking at about 45%, 46% at 11 a.m. So not surprising that the biggest peaks are between 9 and 10:30, and then 11 and 12:30, and then again, there's another afternoon block. Position utilization is pretty steady across that same time. We'll talk a little more about that when we get into some of the other data. But what I want to call out right here, and some of you may have already been looking at this, is that database room utilization average. That's about 44%. That's based on the Gordian database of projects that we have done, again, pre-COVID. And this is saying that SPC is utilizing space at a below average rate compared to our database. Don't want this to seem like an audit or a negative thing. This means there's an opportunity here. There's opportunity, there's flexibility in the space that we already have. So as we look at individual rooms, there's a lot of data on this chart, so I'll try to call out a few specific points. The first is these quadrants are arranged in, you can see on there, position utilization and room utilization. So rooms on the right are used more frequently, rooms near the top are more full when they are used. And so there are a group of 4 rooms, and they're high position, high room utilization. Those are rooms that really present opportunities to study what makes them so popular, why are they able to operate more full than most rooms on campus, and are we able to replicate any of the factors in those rooms in others at those sites? So do they have characteristics, technology, layouts that we're able to replicate elsewhere so that we can get other rooms into that level of popularity and usage because they provide excellent templates for what utilization could be. So this was a lot of work over the past few months, and so talking about those concluding comments, we had a few opportunities that we aligned. Centralizing the scheduling and process of data. So this is about there being different departmental control over scheduling, even at individual sites, down to potentially floor to floor. That creates opacity in the scheduling. And so then what we want to do is make it more transparent so that everyone can understand what is available and what is not. And so that comes with some centralization. The second opportunity is to align class schedules and times to meet student demand. In our discussions, we know that there are evening classes offered, but we found that those are sometimes less preferable for the students. There, if you notice on that previous chart, if you have the deck, you can see that the position utilization falls off in the evening just a little bit, meaning that those rooms may not be as popular, but there is still an opportunity to schedule courses outside of the very typical 9 to 11, 1 to 3 blocks. And then the last piece here, and again, I want to hit on this one very specifically, is embracing the flexibility. Low utilization in and of itself is not a problem. It is an opportunity to improve. It means there is flexibility, there's space to move around, there's space to do renovations, to change layouts, to change technology without having to disrupt severely. And so there's a lot of a good opportunity here, and the team at Cushman & Wakefield is going to talk about this kind of moving forward as to what does that flexibility look like. So with that, I can't recall, are we taking questions now?
Yeah, so we're going to pause here and see if you have any questions or feedback on the utilization.
Chair, can I? Yes. How were you all able to come up with these numbers? I mean, what strategy was used to figure out how many students were in each room, at what hour? Was that done by us and then the information was given to you?
So this is based upon SPC's scheduling data. So the scheduling data that exists, as well as some supplementary information at other sites, where we pulled those in and said, okay, room 201 is scheduled from 2 to 3, and there's 25 students enrolled in the class, and that room holds 40 students. So then we know that for that one room, that's where you get that scatter chart. We know for each individual room what the utilization position is. We know on the whole, we know by site, we know by building. So we actually have a lot of granularity in that data. We're doing our best to summarize in a very short bit of time here. But we use the existing scheduling data for that, as well as some supplementary information where appropriate.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
So on the room and position utilization, the box at the bottom corner where it has low position, low utilization, that's where the largest part of opportunity exists for us to strengthen that. Are you saying that's where there are more classes less filled or rooms less utilized properly? I'm
That's
just trying to
correct.
make sure I understand it.
Yes, so those rooms are used less frequently, and when they are used, they are less filled. We did some additional analysis, it's not on the slide here, and we found that the average room size at SPC for generally used classrooms, so those that really we can focus on when it comes to utilization, holds around 39 students, so just a tick under 40, and yet the average course size enrolled in that is 19 students. So on average, just based upon looking at the courses and the rooms themselves, we're 50% position utilization. So there's an opportunity to not just look at room resizing. Sometimes there are too many chairs in a room, and so if it was full, it would feel tight. So look at right-sizing rooms, as well as adjusting courses to match what students, we have some flexibility to be able to increase course sizes without losing, at least from a physical perspective, having to squeeze people into different rooms. So there's an opportunity there as well. But those bottom left rooms provide an opportunity for improvement. The top right rooms provide a template for what that opportunity or that improvement could
Could
look
look
like.
like, yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Brendan Kohler from Pressburg Dunleavy, Edward Norwood from Pressburg Dunleavy, and we are also working with the Cushman Wakefield team as part of this process. And today we're going to talk to you about one component that we focused on, which was the visioning session. Some of y'all might remember seeing us on the computer screens not too long ago. It's nice to see everyone in person. But we met with multiple stakeholders. One group was the cabinet level. Chairman of the board himself was there. Dr. Williams was there as well. And we had a great session and really focused on where the institution wants to go over a number of various outcomes and categories. And then we had a separate meeting with various other college stakeholders, including a student leader, that really kind of helped us better understand where the college wants to go, but from a more granular perspective. So from those two sessions, we've kind of merged the thoughts that you'll see in the following slides, and we just wanted to present those to you today. They are essentially what has been guiding our thought process through this planning effort and then into the future of the planning effort as well. It's basically creating a framework, a strategic framework for us as we go through this process. Ed, you want to? So basically, out of the two visioning sessions, which were probably 2 hours or so long, we basically came out with three specific outcomes that you see on the screen. So curriculum and developmental outcomes, target market and accessibility, and then finally operation, paradigm, and financial performance. And there's a lot of text on the screen, and I apologize for it to be so heavy, but we really want to make sure that we understood, or that we expressed our understanding of what we believe the framework to be for this planning process. And it's really based off, again, who we heard from SBC, who the institution thinks they are. So under development, curriculum and developmental outcomes, we really heard that it's important for the SPC brand to focus on specific programs. Yes, you want to provide educational opportunities for all students, local and outside the county as well as necessary, but really focusing on some specific programs is an important brand outcome for the institution. That varies from all the various components that you offer currently, from areas at Allstate to the HEC complex. So a number of different items there. Additionally, we really heard that students will do best, or will be served the best, in a more formalized setting. So what does that mean? It's really in person or online within the world that we are in today, but it's not a unintentional environment that you're creating for your students. You're really creating an intentional learning atmosphere where they're more guided by instruction and less guided by self interest or self curiosity. So the key elements here, it's important so that we understand moving forward what that means from a facilities impact. We need to provide those facilities or, again, online opportunities for students. In terms of target market and accessibility, again, it kind of goes along with focusing on the specific programs, but we also want to make sure that you're being market responsive. Yes, you need to provide those core learning opportunities for students, but being able to provide market responsive programs that, again, focus on general needs of the community, of the local area, will really be important moving forward. And again, that might dictate what kind of spaces you'll need moving forward. And then along with that, creating a environment where you're more efficient from a operating cost standpoint, from serving students and community needs. It kind of all blends together, these last couple of points. Creating a better efficiency across the entire spectrum of the campuses will not only help, obviously, from a financial aspect for the institution, but also create a environment for students that is kind of equal across all campuses. We heard that there are some, and we've seen in our tours, that there might be some discrepancies in an experience level from one campus to the next. And we heard from both vision groups, honestly, that it should be more of a cohesive experience across the entire spectrum, no matter what kind of program that you're in. And last and least, definitely not least important, is the financial performance. And we heard from the group that it's important for SBC to continue to be very, very smart with their debt moving forward. And you've done a great job of kind of getting out of certain debt obligations in the past. And so moving forward, it will be important that we leverage what we have currently to enhance financial opportunities. So looking at current assets and how we can better optimize them. Well, then also looking at potential third-party partnerships as well to kind of help move the college. Edward, anything else?
Yeah. So the thought was we'll take these three different pillars from our working on vision sessions: curriculum development, target market accessibility, and operating paradigm and financial performance. Coalesce those into a vision for SBC as we continue to move forward. Not only for the portfolio plan, but specifically for the P3 process that we're going to start subsequent to this effort of the actual development plan for SBC. So really understanding again, kind of piggybacking off what Brandon said, what are these key elements that SBC wants to be, regardless of where you're located? It's this campus, this campus, this campus. What does that experience look like for a student? How does the college operate that particular that location? And what service offerings do you provide? What academic programs, online, etc. programs do you provide? What's true to your core and what's non-core that you could possibly either partner with a development partner to get off your balance sheet or sell holistically? So we wanted to pause here first and then we can take some questions before we to the next slide.
Any questions?
Chair.
Yep.
With respect to the common experience across campuses, that's obviously something the college has struggled with just from both a scheduling standpoint, what classes are offered, the personality of each campus. What did that recommendation focus on? Was it more tangible things like technology and what the quality of the classrooms? Was it delivery of opportunities? Where did those?
So I think part of it, it wasn't to say that one campus is deficient in terms of technology versus
Right.
another. I don't think that was what it was the comment. It's more so from a student services standpoint. For instance, if you're at Gibbs, it's an entirely different experience than, if you were a student maybe at an All-State. Now, obviously different students, different populations, but at Gibbs, there's a more of a direct opportunity to know, if I have a question on a course or something, I know where to go. Whereas some campuses, it might not be as open, and you have to kind of go through online services and try to find things. And so really that kind of gets to what could some consolidation of services across, how do we make that a general experience for all students, and they're not having to come from Clearwater to go downtown or vice versa to figure out where they need to go.
I think that was the best way to wrap it up. I think that the thought is, the key for that question is, do you still want to have a centralized or decentralized system? And what's important for that process? If it's decentralized on a campus level, there are particular assets and benefits for that process versus actually having it centralized at one or two locations. And what's the best decision moving forward, understanding how the real estate implications from that decision.
Any other questions?
Anybody else? We're good.
And the next slide is really just to kind of show you all that we didn't just derive those bullets out of thin air. We spent a lot of time with the groups, and really the entire premise of our visioning sessions are to identify where the institution believes they are currently and where they need to go into the future. And so you can kind of see this is a very high-level summary of what those discussions were, but these kind of give you a general idea of where we focus some of those outcomes. One thing to note, it was really interesting in the number 2, the breadth and depth. You can see a large gap there, and it's a little deceiving because that was something that we talked about with the group about being market responsive and being leaders in a certain program. And so really, while the gap is 6, it's really because the way we looked at the scale is basically the institution needs to be on both sides. So it's not so much that you have a huge gap that you need to fix. It's more so we think we need to fall on both sides of the spectrum, being market responsive and being leader in various programming elements. Any questions here?
So this essentially is the gap analysis.
It's essentially that's correct.
So further questions on that? Hi everyone, I'm Pete Marhosky. I'm from Cushman & Wakefield. Some of you may have remembered me presenting in September to the board. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about where we all go with this. So in essence, when doing a portfolio plan, real estate is usually the most expensive, second or third most expensive item for a university or public institution. And it's very prudent and fiscally prudent, of course, to be looking at it strategically. So what everything boils down to when we look at that is what is core and what is non-core. And we hold a mirror up to SBC and say, even from an academic standpoint, what's core to your mission? What are you to deliver? What's your mission statement? Because over time, institutions tend to grow into things that they look back and say, when did we take that on? Why? And how? And then real estate follows that. Real estate's everyone's favorite hobby, and before you know it, you have a collection of some buildings and assets that you're not sure how you got them in the first place or why. So what we do is try to hold the mirror up and say, okay, what is core? Simple definition is all the legacy campuses are core. So how do you treat core assets? Well, that's where your capital goes. You spend your capital on maintaining those investments. You maximize occupancy and utilization, which speaks to the classroom utilization analysis. And you focus on reducing operating costs and maintaining them efficiently. So the interesting thing, of course, with campuses is, let's say you're overspaced for the classroom utilization detail. Well, it's if you have 20 classrooms in a certain building, or 10, or what have you, it's hard to get rid of 2 or 3 or what have you. And if you blended some together, then your room utilization goes even lower because you have more seats in a classroom and same number of people attending. So that solutioning out extra classroom space comes from different initiatives. Some of those initiatives could include some of the programs that are in kind of isolated buildings, perhaps consolidating into an existing campus. Those are the things we're going to be talking about over the next month or so with the provost and others at SBC. For those that are non-core, so you take an asset that's kind of sitting alone, not sure whether or not you should be invested in the mission, what do you do with it? So we categorize those into high barriers to sale, and those are usually political, and we don't mean that in any negative term, just that you have a very good program, and I just think of like a Bay Pines as an example. Putting a for sale sign on that is not probably the best way to go with something like a Bay Pines. However, there is a chance to transfer that program or treat a program, exchange it with another public entity or nonprofit who just simply takes over and continues the mission, but it doesn't remain core to SBC. So therefore, you're divesting of the asset in a very user-friendly manner. Or you find partners who say, we'll take over that facility, we'll pay you the operating costs, and therefore it's neutral in your balance sheets. Low barriers to sale are those that, we have a few examples, kind of an isolated asset sitting there, it's non-core to your mission, and just does not lend itself to maintain in the future. Usually you see with those, the amount of deferred maintenance is very high compared to the value, and therefore just does not make a lot of sense fiscally or even strategically to kind of keep on your balance sheet. So in those cases, you can fee simple, sell them fee simple, or lease them out, or what have you, to kind of reduce your costs or create revenue. And we'll look at a couple examples or how this works. Sorry, I'm changing on my own computer here. That won't do it, will it? So some of you may have seen this before. We look at the prioritization of surplus assets, and it fits into these 4 quadrants. You see the value, revenue generation opportunity on the one axis going up, and then the complexity level from low to high. So high complexity, low value, you kind of put those in the back burner and say, we're not going to worry about those right now. Low risk, high returns represent those that are, do not disrupt your operations. You call them kind of quick wins. Strategic projects are very high in value as well, but a little bit more tricky in terms of operational disruption. You put some of our P3 analysis, the public-private partnership projects that are, we'll discuss in a little bit, probably into that quadrant. They're very high value, but you have to unwind a lot to treat them. Small wins are those that may not be of high value, but they're easy to get off your books, and it's just good housekeeping. And then proceed with caution are very risky, low payback, and so on. And we have a couple examples. So off the bat, HEC Annex, sitting there alone, isolated. I think a lot of deferred maintenance. SBC has moved operations out of this facility. Same with Gibbs Wellness and the Coliseum parking lot, which is next door here as well. Those just look like easy wins with minimal disruption to any programs, and it helps you build momentum as well. Saying, okay, that could total about $6 to $9 million in value there, and then while that's happening, we start looking at the strategic projects with public-private partnerships, et cetera. And we have just some more details on. These are kind of physical details on the properties and the assets and so forth. Just a couple. So any questions where we are in that process? I think over the next
I have one. Are we going to because I don't know where the HEC, I don't know where the Gibbs Wellness Annex is.
That's over Trustee Gibbons, right by Gibbs campus. You remember when you go over the railroad tracks and you make that left? It's like used to have an Olympic pool and
Oh, yeah.
Like the residential
dance
area.
studio. You know what I'm talking about?
The interesting thing and what we'd like to do is, unfortunately, St. Petersburg College does not have recent facility condition assessments, which an engineering firm goes through building by building and catalogs everything along with the property and tallies the amount of deferred maintenance. Usually, a solution like this, or the answer is, you might have $2 million in market value. You might also be saving $2 million in deferred maintenance, and you're not heating and cooling and insuring it anymore. So the win for SBC is more than market value. It's what you get to, it's cost avoidance as well.
But wouldn't a property like this wellness center one, you're saying that our suggested asking price should be somewhere around 2.1 million. Wouldn't the college get more long-term revenue if we were in a partnership for maybe affordable housing and partner with the city or somebody else because of the lack of land in the county and the push for workforce or affordable housing?
I think the answer to that, has an altruistic nature of it. So certainly in terms of SBC's goals, if that's what it would like to pursue, absolutely. In terms of value, then we'd have to look at the cost of, who pays to convert or renovate it into the public housing and
Not public housing.
or affordable housing. Sorry.
Not public housing.
And
Because what I see in every report that I see from the state and from the county is that students are having a hard time finding a place to live. And they are usually working in some service-related industry. So wouldn't it be beneficial for us, just like the university system, get in a partnership with some maybe nonprofit group that would allow for us to guarantee a certain amount of students when we offer it that would be in there so that they in the housing so that they're guaranteed some revenue, but we also get a portion of those funds based upon the land lease that we would give them long term.
Sure.
What does that deal look like? Does that give us more than 2.1 million over, let's say, a 50-year period?
I don't know offhand, certainly, but
Trustee Gibbons.
I'd like to see an assessment of something like that done as opposed to just selling or keeping.
Trustee Gibbons, we can make that adjustment. A lot of this was really a result of the real estate committee recommendations as well. So these properties were discussed through that process. Also knowing, that was several months ago, so it's not that we can't make adjustments, but this was really based off of recommendations from the real estate
And
committee.
Jeanette, don't take this the wrong way. What I'm saying is we seem to always want to find the easy way to do things at the college. Doing the right thing is not always easy. Sometimes it's very difficult, right? And it requires a little more work, but in the end, we get something accomplished that's a better product, and it actually meets the needs of the people that we are trying to serve. The gentleman just said in his report earlier, he said, I think it was him that said, you find these things that you have to do in the county that are not necessarily in your core business, but they benefit the people that you're serving in your core business. So I'd really like for us to start looking beyond just here's what we should do right now, and this is how the college benefits right now. What happens 10, 15, 20 years from now? I know for sure that Trustee Cole could tell you that land is at an all-time high, and it's only going to go get more expensive in this county because we're landlocked, right? If you look at any report from the state, it tells you that this is the most densely populated county in the state, second to Dade, and one particular area, which is Carroll City and Liberty City. So we're smushed in here. So land is very valuable, and the way that we utilize it to get long-term sources of income for the college, but also meeting a need of our students and people in the surrounding community may be more valuable to us long-term than just making an assessment to sell. I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I'm just telling you that I think that we need to be able to look at this in a visionary, long strategic plan concept it's like having Tom Brady. Nobody knew he was going.
We have employees driving as far as an hour, hour and a half to get to the college one way. And so I just wanted to make sure we look at, if there's some opportunity for that we look at that as well.
I mean, you can open it up to the marketplace, but I think definitely, for example, I was speaking to a coach maybe 9 months ago, and, basketball team, the girls' basketball team is walking a mile from a building when they could easily be running in this place, and we could adjust that and have some benefit to scholarship players being in. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I just, when you say employees,
I just wanted to add them.
No, I have no, listen, Dr. Williams, I'm all for that. I just say open it up to the market and let them apply just like
Right.
anybody else with whoever their partner would be, if that's a route that we would go. But I think we have an obligation to make sure that student housing, even though we're not in that business, there's maybe somebody else that can do that. Because I'm telling you, I'm almost, our average age of student is 27. Most of the women that are 27, a lot of them, not most, a lot, have children, and they're going back to school. They're trying to work a job, trying to manage schedules. The closer they are to their education would be helpful. I mean, what's the two things that they say that are needed when you have a child, as a woman or a man, is transportation, right, and childcare. Right, here's an opportunity for us, I think, to look at putting childcare maybe in the facility, and then transportation is not really needed because you're 2 blocks down the street from where you got to go to class. So I'm just saying, I want to look at it from that perspective. I'm not poo-pooing on because I don't want faculty and staff to be like, well, everything related to faculty and staff. This guy's like, no. I'm just saying that we have a big market of students, a lot of students that go here that probably can't afford, which is why, Dr. Williams, the thing that you're doing with the clothing and the pantry on campuses is so good for these folks, because we don't know who's struggling, right? But they get an opportunity to get help.
Yeah, just to your point, we put notional sale prices on those properties, but under low barriers to sale, depending on the mission of the college system, to either sell a fee simple if it's something that's isolated, or ground lease it or lease it out.
Yeah.
And that is if you do have a mission such as that, or you want to keep it in your coffers for the long term. After the ground lease expires, obviously it still belongs to the college. So those can be considered in all instances.
Chair Cabell?
Trustee Cole.
I was just going to comment along those lines. I know a few years ago, Trustee Stonecipher and Trustee Gibbons and I were at a ACCT conference out in San Francisco, and we attended a seminar about providing dormitories. And at that time, and it was a few years ago, I think sitting around talking, we were like, there is zero chance we want to be in that business providing dormitories, right?
Yeah,
and,
I would agree with that, actually.
Yeah, and so I think that's probably the direction the team has had, because we came out of that, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but we came out of that after listening to those conversations saying there is zero chance we want to be in that business as a core business. That said, the market has definitely evolved in the past 3 years. I mean, significantly. There's been a complete shift in Pinellas County. And so I agree that if we're looking at P3s, when we're looking at that, I would like to see the difference between a public-private, and I don't like to use P3 because I think that can be misinterpreted in a lot of ways, so let me erase that. I would like to see the difference between a simple ground lease to perhaps a third party versus if we decide it is in our core to partner with another institution that can provide a specific resource to our students or team. I think that that's a different, I don't look at that necessarily. It will play into the real estate strategies. I view that as what is our core competency, what are we providing as resources, and what's important, and then how can we utilize our real estate to meet those needs. And using our real estate to meet those needs could be looked at in two different ways, in my opinion. One, it could be a straight sale where we take the $5 million. We have plenty of room, for example, on Clearwater campus to build something, and then we hire an operator. Or it could mean taking a piece of available property that we already have, partnering with an affordable housing or workforce housing developer, and simply saying, we'll contribute the land if you do the project and give our students the first priority. So I do think those are important things
And we
that we
get
should be
money out
looking
of
at, but I think before I would want this team to just look at those as alternatives, I would think we would want to identify, we would need to do some more research to decide where are the students who need those resources located, where are your team members who need those resources located, where do they live, and what we could do. And from there, I think the door's open, but I agree. The times have changed, especially in the past 3 years, so.
Nobody knows that better than you.
Yeah.
But I totally agree. I just, if there's a use that the college can get out of any piece of land that would help our students or faculty or staff, I would like to, like Trustee Cole said, just get a better assessment of whether that's the case. I'm usually an opponent of selling off our land because it's so valuable at this point. But if it makes sense, and it's going to yield the most revenue and serve the community better, and we're acting as a good player and partner in that, I'm for it.
I have a technical question. I know one thing that when we started the real estate assessment conversation 2 or 3 years ago, we talked high level, and I don't recall the details, and if I even have it right in my mind, about the difference between leasing or retaining the property on the state funding and how that plays in. And did you all look at that? One of my concerns personally when we've been looking at disposing of property is we have a significant amount of underutilized property, either from a space standpoint, to your point with the classrooms, or generally vacant land. And it's my recollection that our state funding, one of the metrics that numbers that gets plugged in is the space utilization percentage. And so one of the directives in the past by the board has been get that percentage in line, because from a long-term standpoint, all of the savings that we may incur would also be reflected then in positioning ourselves for a greater line item funding from the state. I know that was a very simplistic explanation of that, but
overview, that's accurate.
Okay.
I think at the time, which is why at the time also the real estate committee kind of suggested this, was also because for the last 3 years we have not received some of digits funding,
Right.
which is for our deferred maintenance. And you'll see in the financial presentation, we're estimating close to $4 million a year in maintenance for our buildings. So it was at the time, the decision was to focus on maybe some of the quick wins in order to help with the buildings that we have that are either at or close to useful life. Like you all mentioned, the market has changed. It could be reassessed, but that was really the focus at the time.
I think to Trustee Gibbons' point, looking at the long-term benefit of disposition versus retention, I would want to see how it plays into state funding as well, because holding on to something for a nominal rent over 90 years, if that means we're getting dinged annually on a state utilization assessment, that we would more than make up that money just in the straight formula. And that's obviously a risk. The formula changes every year. There's who knows,
Right.
but yeah,
I would agree. It has to be a value for us
Yeah.
to be able. It has to be a value proposition where we would be getting something from partner developer or something that will be worth us keeping the land and being able to put that into our budget and maybe be helpful to
Right.
some other area of the college.
Right. And to your point also, prior to the pandemic, the state was looking into the APOG reports, which is a more rigid or prudent way to look at the space utilization. The pandemic kind of put that on pause, but that we're expecting that to resurface at some point.
I wouldn't expect it to resurface before November. These people are running for office, so.
No, but I think to that point, one of the things that we hear in Tallahassee regularly is, they want students on campus, right? So this administration wants students on campus irrespective of the pandemic. While we have always been open for business and always had a very good online presence, it's difficult for us to tell that story based on APAGA reports when we're looking at 50% classroom utilization and 20% position space. And so that has always weighed heavy in my recommendations to dispose of property, is getting those percentages in line. So we have we have all these campuses and all this property, whether it's utilized by us, by a big toe of ours, it still counts against us. And so that has always weighed heavily too, is how do we shrink our denominator so we can be better representative of what we actually are.
Mr. Chair, but that only in response, not to debate. I think one of the things that I would like us to do as a second part of evaluating whether we do this is, when we had a report maybe a year and a half ago maybe, about online courses, there was a dramatic drop-off in the type of grades that students get, success rates related to online versus being in the seats, which tells me one of two things. Either, well, it's a bunch of things. I don't want to say one or two. One of the things that we really should evaluate is it because the student is too far away, right? Is it because they're out of state? Or is it they just want to be at home? If they just want to be at home, that's just not something we can fix, right? But if there are students that say, well, I come to class at 6 o'clock or 7:30 at night if I were closer, right? Then these types of opportunities would give them that opportunity. But I'm with you, Trustee Cole, on that. You're exactly right. I don't want to get dinged from the state. But also be mindful that the state, once you take things to them and if we do this the right way and we figure out how to do it the right way and partner and use the public-private partnership, I'm going to stay away from the P3 thing as well, properly, we could end up being a model for the state. And I know that these folks are looking for models because the pandemic has changed how education is distributed, given, and the consumer has changed, right? Because everybody now has, if you look at, I think SBA had some report out, 60% of the population now has an online or some type of business that they've started as a result of, being out of work or is an independent contractor of some sort. So the delivery and who we're delivering to has definitely changed. Space needs have definitely changed in the county too. So,
do we have the ability to show, for instance, let's look at a 20 or 30 year window of what the cost savings would be as well? So if we're going to sell an asset for 1.7 or 1.9 million, what are we also going to save in costs each year going forward, so that when we're talking about this and when we're trying to make these decisions, I can see the full financial impact and picture?
Yeah, and along those lines, the counterpoint to Trustee Gibbons' landlocked argument is that has pushed prices to all-time highs.
yeah, that's right. I'm with you.
So it's which is it's hard to know. The real estate guys in the room know more than I do.
No, you're right. You're right. And I'll tell you this, though. The thing that Katie brought up is that we get hit in Tallahassee for having too much space, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
But when you get that money, remember, we can only have so much in reserve, and the state's going to take that. So you damn
That's why
if
we're
you do.
reinvesting it.
Exactly. That's why
Yeah.
I'm saying it may be better to take that's why I'm bringing this up only for
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
The long-term play may be better more beneficial to us because we're serving a student or a community need and getting revenue long-term that will either go back into the investment or back into the college in a way that can't be taken. Now, if we get dinged and we're making $10 million over a 15-year period or something like that by the state, for having the space, is that worth it? We have to assess that.
Yeah, the intended use of the funds, I think, is what we're
Becomes-
talking about.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think the intended use is definitely a big deal, and if we sold something, trust you me, there are enough facilities on the campuses that we're keeping that need to be upgraded and improved, and would probably outweigh the sale price for what we need to fix throughout our main service campuses. So I don't know if we sold, it would go directly into reserves. It will be used to help improve first the facilities that are horrendously outdated and need some major renovations. And so I think bringing that back to the board would be, important for the board to know, here's what needs to be repaired and fixed that we currently do not have the ability to do.
So what was the one thing that you talked about in Tallahassee, right?
Deferred
The
maintenance.
county argument is deferred maintenance, right? And you're looking for PICO to get it. Every year, they don't give you PICO, right?
Exactly.
So that's why I'm saying, think about a long-term play. You maybe have a maintenance fund that's created from a different type of partnership. I'm telling you, we're going to have to start, and I'm a short timer, I believe, on this board, but I'm just telling you, we are going to have to start looking at the future for other people, because if we don't, education is going to change dramatically in the state of Florida. It already has. Every year they find some new way of evaluating us that I really can't understand how we're being evaluated, right? And if we don't get smarter about the long play, we're going to just be at their mercy every year and trying to figure out, well, hey, are we a gold in this kid? Are we silver in this one? Or are we platinum in it? So
He's not joking.
I know.
we really, I mean, the deck chairs change every year because when they make a new appointment to the university, the state college board, they change what we're doing. So,
That's correct.
no, I'm just telling you, that's the truth.
It is.
And just to add to that, to Trustee Gibbons' point, with the reserves, right now, that's specific to our operating fund with the spending plan. So far with the sales, the funding would go to capital, which is what Dr. Williams, but also when we talk about partnerships, there's opportunities for the auxiliary fund, which is probably preferred for the college. So those are things as we continue to discuss options, we'll think about and talk through what fund would this actually impact and how it would impact us going forward.
Yep.
It's good.
And, it's a perfect transition to our next slide. Not to we all P3, but I agree with you completely. That is not a silver bullet. It is not, a magic bullet, whatever you want to call it, that, fixes all. It is more so a tagline, if you will. But we are, in the beginning stages of the process of looking at what third-party opportunities do exist. Initially we have identified HEC and Allstate as two potential options just because of the market that surrounds those areas. The opportunities to potentially enhance those specific locations seem to be appropriate as a third-party partnership. And so we are in the process of exploring what those opportunities are, how, to what extent they exist. And then also getting a preliminary understanding of how the market might respond to them. So we're not going out for any kind of solicitation. That's not part of what we're doing right now. It's really to really understand what opportunities exist, how we can define that project that might be for the market, and then kind of give the market a little what we call market sounding, but give them a little glimpse into what could be and see how they respond, and see what kind of interest we receive from them, because we can gauge whether it's worth pausing on going out to solicitation immediately, or if it is worth going out immediately because of the market conditions. So that is all part of where we are right now. As you can see on the screen, we're about almost complete with the confirmation of goals and objectives, and it kind of leads to what we're talking about with the visioning sessions. We have a number of stakeholders, I believe 6 more, that we're still meeting with individually to get a better understanding of various elements. And then we really will take a deeper dive into what that means from from a market standpoint, from an institution standpoint, as you all brought up and know much better than I do, but how that kind of plays with the state, we will look at all those factors, and then finally develop, kind of a recommendation or strategy as to how we believe we can best proceed with a third-party partnership.
I'm sorry, just real quickly, HEC, of course, also recognizes that while you're a university with lots of space, it doesn't mean that you don't need newer and more evolved space, especially when it comes to the health and sciences. So that is the potential leverage opportunity there, too, to kind of keep up with the market in terms of what the demand is.
Yeah, I was just going to ask to be specific in that I would be interested to know, because to Trustee Gibbons' point, the state uses that P3 statute and talks about how they encourage us to do that. I do not know, though, how that plays in with our space utilization study and our state funding and what they're looking at. And I would be interested to know, because while I think obviously leveraging resources is extremely important and would be a benefit, if you continue to be deemed for owning the property, and to that point, none of us are shy about picking up the phone and calling our legislators and telling them they need to change the statute. So, but those are the types of things, hey, look, you want us to use this resource, we're happy to do it, but we don't want to get dinged, and so if you want us to do it, you need to amend the statute, and we're all happy to make those calls too. So those types of recommendations would be appreciated.
Sure, and that's the next step, is for us to better understand what Janet and you all already know, and kind of figure out how those apply across the board. And that's why the P3 nomenclature is
right.
Touchy subject. We're looking at third party, we'll call it.
There you go. I like that better.
Any other questions on this process? Okay, we can stay on our allotted time. So big next steps are incorporating the feedback from today. This is very productive, and I think we're going to look hard, of course, at state regulations and rules and see, with your real estate, if an income stream was made, how that compares to a fee simple sale, and also can that income stream perhaps be leveraged or used to pay debt for some kind of one-off financing to help you with your deferred maintenance. Look at all the rules and regulations having to do with that. We're meeting with at least 6 more provost deans regarding academic utilization and mission. That dovetails into the P3 stakeholder meetings, continue with those. We're preparing a draft portfolio plan for early February. We're going to be vetting that and then taking the final recommendations to account for our presentation of the recommendations to the board in March. So we are moving on ahead, and I think this is extremely productive. So please, any other questions or comments, or we'd be happy to take them into consideration as we continue to work and move forward.
I just want to say I know what an undertaking this is. We all do. So thank you for putting in all the time and energy.
I would say, across the board, every person we're working with is absolutely best in class and dedicated to the cause. So it's really, really nice to see.
Yeah, I think we have faith in that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I do want to thank you guys. I sent back a lot of questions. I have the big deep dive review, and you're really putting in a lot of effort to tailor it to SPC, which is so important to us. We're spending a lot of our time and talent and money to make this work. And so I want to thank all the partners and your questions and doing a lot of dumpster diving. I mean, you're really digging in and asking some questions that we may not have had the answer at the time, and we have it now. And so I just want to thank you for the work you've done, and I look forward to what we do going forward. And to the trustees, thank you for your feedback and ideas. Some of this for Trustee Gibbons might feel a little repetitive, but he is passionate about that, and I do appreciate the work that you've done. And to the team out there, thank you for going back 2 or 3 times to get what we need. And so I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
It really comes down to review approach and come at it from that to look at what are our core values, where do we need the properties, how do we maximize the student experience in those spots, and then you go, okay, so we need these 5.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get an email.
So focus on what
Or if I get, send them tomorrow, and I get 1,000 a day.
I need to find out where Janet might have said it. Let me find
I
out where
don't
she
want to come back, you can sit in a seat and then
Thank you, good job.
4 years
Janet,
ago, we were sitting here
Janet,
talking about building
Janet.
dormitories, and we're like, oh no, we don't want to be in the dorm business. That said,
Our board, we promised that annually we would bring you the health of the organization to you, and it's that time of the year. We did this last year, and we're bringing it again this year. So Vice President Hunt will help lead this initiative.
Yes, so as Dr. Williams said, we've come to that point of the year where we're reporting the closing of the prior fiscal year. Typically for everybody, the fiscal year ends on June 30th, with the exception of accounting functions and auditors. It's kind of the beginning. So for about 6 months, we go through finalizing those processes. This timing of this workshop is perfect because yesterday we had our financial exit conference with our local auditor general, who informed us that we had no findings on our financial audit. So again, the team has done a stellar job at just supplying the auditors with information and operating with internal controls and all the things that go along with that process. This year where we are is two things. One, you have in your folder, you have a document which is our 3-year financial plan, which Dr. Hector Laura, the AVP of Budget, and Mike May, the AVP of Financial and Accounting Services, will go through many of the highlights. The last time we did a 3-year financial plan, it really was focused on and done and developed with the accounting and budgeting functions. This year we did enhance it and made sure it was a much more collaborative process. The team worked with the committee chairs of the strategic plan. It was heavily guided by the strategic plan. As you all know, our financial plan is not only to be sound fiscally, but also to support the strategic initiatives of the college. And so that was very important for us to include that in this process. You'll also see within the presentation that we have done a lot of work over the last 5 years with your guidance and Dr. Williams' leadership on including our fiscal position. And so you'll kind of see, we'll talk through what the focus would be in the next 3 years. And the conversation for the master plan really is a good segue into that conversation when we talk about redesigning SPC, especially since the pandemic. And that's innovation and sometimes really investing into yourself. So you'll see over the last 5 years, we've really worked on building up and sustaining. And then we'll start to see as we talk through, how are we going to start to really invest in ourselves? And that will really be the focus over the next 3 years. And so without further ado, we'll start the presentation. Also, we also have a highlight of the fiscal health of the college that you have as well.
Thank you, Janet. Good morning, Chair Kimball, Trustee and Dr. Williams. As always, I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to be here today. As Janet mentioned it, we work in a 3-year financial planning scenario, and to gather the quantitative data and corresponding assumption, we engage the chair for the academic excellence, economic mobility, community and civic engagement, employee engagement and retention, and financial literacy. We also add the student affairs and enrollment management, the foundation, workforce, grant department, institutional effectiveness and academic services, institutional research and effectiveness, student spirit, and strategic innovation. I would like to thank Stan for the opportunity to help Mike and I to kind of put this together for you. Our introduction denotes the college mission, which is empower our student and community to achieve success and economic mobility. And I'm just going to cruise through the presentation here. And at the same time, we enhance the vision, which is to be a premier college enriching and strengthening the life through a community of care, and we implement the institutional values. Since 2018, SPC continued to align its financial resources to enhance student success. As you recall, instructional expenditure consists of the college-wide expenditures related to instructional activities. The instructional department includes direct instruction, academic support, student support, and public service. The administrative function consists of the college-wide administrative function that take care of the students. And that include legal services, business services, and executive services. When you move along, you can see in the graph as reflected that the graph below for the 2017-18, our administrative function, color in green, decreased almost 50% in relation to the year 2020-21. It's imperative to denote that the changes account for the effect of the coronavirus in the last 2 years. Our current position in SPC. SPC is experiencing several financial pressure due to the impact of COVID-19. It's also important to remember that this pressure includes an enrollment decline of 10% in the fall 2020 and 9.1% in the fall 2021. There is increased costs related to health insurance, increased costs to non-insurance health, and inflation. Now, due to the current circumstances, SPC has developed the following financial goals and objectives for the next 3 years. And I want to highlight some of the important points. Within the financial health of SPC, we have the budget with strategic plan priorities. We have to develop a comprehensive financial dashboard to enhance data-driven decision, cost analysis, and budget with strategic plan priorities. And we also want to focus on growing the SPC title funds. We strategically allocated the Federal Emergency Fund time to the plan priorities, and we also maximize the utilization of local and diverse suppliers. When I utilize entrepreneurial practices informed by data, we do want to identify the 2020-2021 key performance indicator. We want to develop budget versus actual function allocation dashboard. We want to focus on a 3-year key performance indicators ratio that help us to enhance the strategic initiative for ratio improvement. We also want to create and expand our donor pipeline. We want to focus on optimized property and technology assets by performing the real estate strategic master planning assessment, which you just heard about it from Cushman & Wakefield. We also want to initiate a plan based on the result of the real estate master planning, the environmental report, and space utilization software. Over the next 3 years, SPC Foundation is focusing on several initiatives that play a key role in the financial strategic plan. They commence a quiet phase of a $30 billion comprehensive fundraising campaign celebrating the 100th anniversary of St. Petersburg College. They also look forward to develop and implement a plan for the philanthropic support of the vendor of the college. The grant department supports the college in securing and implementing grants to assist in achieving the strategic plan. They want to focus and increase the amount of federal, state, local, and foundation grant funding received by SPC. And at the same time, they want to develop relationships with new funders and community partners. When you look at the workforce strategies to provide responsive short-term programs and contractual agreements which lead to training and hiring of the high-skilled, high-wages position and target industry. They want to focus and develop with business and industry a co-investment model that will finance workforce development programs and their sustainability. They also look forward to achieve the paradigm of non-credit short-term programs to being a longer-term investment feeder for the college academic credit programs by increasing the student conversion rate. We will look forward to close the black student retention gap and to close the success gap. We also want to serve as a catalyst for positive change in our community with key partnership, civic engagement, and service learning. We do want to increase our free earned media outreach and increase our volunteer hours as well. For an employee engagement strategy, we want to develop and implement competitive practice to retain and recruit high-performing talent. We also want to focus and support the human capital management business operation by leveraging update technology. Next, we're going to go to the operating budget, and I kind of want to read this chart as we're going through and walk you through the chart. What you see right now is projected revenue and expenses on the 3 scenarios, the optimistic, the base, and the pessimistic, which resulted from data analysis and current assumptions. All 2021 enrollment have no indication of recovery from prior year decline. Among other challenges like increasing health insurance costs, price of goods and service, and shortage of human capital, SPC leaders continue to respond quickly to these evolving matters. SPC tactically allocated the carry-forward spending plan category submitted to the state. The current scenarios do not include the leverage of the funds for the carry-forward spending plan. The budget scenarios provide leadership with a detailed view of the main driver of SPC financial. State appropriation and student tuition fee account for 94.5% of the budget revenue for the fiscal year 21-22, and similarly, personnel and benefits account for 75.9% of the budget expenses for the fiscal year 21-22. Looking at the revenue, we're going to start with the state appropriation. As you are aware, legislation went into section on January 11th. State appropriation include the community college program funding, lottery allocation, performance-based funding. The following scenario represents a range of possibilities concerning state appropriation. On the optimistic side, state appropriation will increase slightly. In the last 5 years, we have not had a year of the state appropriation decline in correlation to our enrollment. under this scenario, there's an increase of about $700,000 year over year. Under the base, state appropriation will remain flat. And under the pessimistic, in the fiscal year 2021, SPC received $1.6 million in performance funding dollars. For the fiscal year 21-22, we received $1.2 million in performance-based funding dollars. Overall, the 21-22 general appropriation increased $5.1 million. Now, taking into account the reduction of the performance-based funding in the increase of the Florida retirement system of $448,000 to SPC. Our scenarios assume a decrease in relation to the performance-based funding that could result in a reduction of $2.3 million over the course of the next 3 years. Now into the student tuition, which is the second line right here. SPC student tuition include both the associated baccalaureate division rate as well the out-of-state fee for non-resident students. The Department of Education used the information in the full-time equivalent enrollment report and planning activities. St. Petersburg College used a conservative approach when we assessing expenditure to the projected tuition revenue. Now keep in mind that the strategic plan and the FTE goals focus on enrollment goals. There is no mathematical modeling that can predict the lingering effect of the COVID-19. Really quickly, I want to take you to this chart. And this chart right here, as you can see, this chart is provided by the Florida Office of Economic and Demographic Research. The pink line right here illustrates the projection of the Department of Education by March. If you look at it, luckily enough, they were projecting that we're going to hit the ball out of the park if you look at it from that perspective back in March. Now, luckily enough, we follow a conservative approach. The green line that you see in here is the projection that we have by the Florida Department of Education back in August. The blue line denotes the projection right here that is encompassed the Department of Education forecasting in conjunction with the college assumption and the economic and demographic research recommendation. I want to bring you back to the tuition and fees. And we're going to start with the optimistic. Enrollment will be flat for the fiscal year 22-23, resulting in a 4.5 million reduction in enrollment, and then there is an increase of 1% in the subsequent year, resulting in an increase of about $400,000 per year. When we look at the base right now, enrollment will decrease 3% for the fiscal year 22-23. It's going to be flat for the year 23-24, and then for the year 24-25, there is a 0.05% increase. This projection is based on the actual revenue received in the fall and the forecasted revenue for the spring and summer semester of the fiscal year 21-22. The financial implications show a 5.8 million decrease in revenue, flat the following year, and about 200,000 following thereafter. For the pessimistic enrollment, will decline by 5.7% for the fiscal year 22-23, 6.6% in the fiscal year 23-24, and 6.7% in the year 24-25, resulting in a 11.9 million decrease in tuition revenue over the next 3 fiscal years. It's important to mention that the decrease in enrollment might modify our spending plan due to a reduction in fund balance from 7% to 5%. According to the Florida statute, each Florida college system institution with less than 50,000 FTE have to drop from 7% to 5%. Now on to the distance learning fee.
Just 1 second before we move on. The pessimistic assumptions were based on the state's assumptions and what they projected. So we took that as a worst case scenario. Of course, the college is putting into play other avenues in order to combat that, but that was really derived from the state's projections.
And along those lines, I know we have generally, especially the past 4 or 5 years, trended better than the overall state with respect to enrollment. Where are we now? If the state projects, I think, a 10% reduction and we're projecting 3, do you know that off the top?
We just started the first round. bring this here, I think it is. We just, Matthew, we submit the FTE projection, what was, like,
We submitted them in November for this year with about an 8% down.
8%.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other question about that?
No question about that, but I do want to say that as we look at the new funding formula and the credentials that they're looking at and what programs the state will fund and no longer fund, that is going to impact this number as well. And so trustees, as the state looks at what programs yield to high wage paying jobs, they're saying that they're no longer going to supplement these students' enrollment if they are not in a program that yields to a high wage paying job. And the state has identified what the salaries have to be. So SPC has some of those programs. We have some of those that are no longer going to be considered fundable by the state. And so what we would need to do, we have two options. We can teach out those programs and be done, or we can find a corporate partner who would be willing to supplement what the state would not supplement to pay for tuition for the full cost of instruction. The other piece to this puzzle is there are programs in Pinellas County that are on the state list that we may not be offering that we need to look at to offer. And so, you know, Trustee Gibbons talks about how things change. This is said change. And so as we look at our programs for the trustees and for our employees in the audience and live streamed, we need to really understand there will be some changes in some of the programs that we'll be offering, you know, if we're not able to find another party to help supplement the full cost of instruction. And the state has their list. If you want to see it, contact Dr. Lee Altroth. He can show you that list. It's not an SPC list. It's the state list. But I don't think that as we look at the predictions here, we may not have included some of that wiggling with that. So I just thought it was important that I say that publicly.
Perfect. And that's correct. As I mentioned earlier on, this is just a clear picture of where we are based on the main driver of the institution. Where we are as of today with assumption, not taking into consideration some of the changes that are going to come down the pipe by the legislation. Now moving into the digital learning fee, those are assessed to student enrollment in the associate and baccalaureate division online courses. Now, since the pandemic, the higher education industry has seen significant shift to online modality. As the new norm settle, SPC will analyze the baseline for online supply and demand. I'm optimistic for the digital learning fee. There are efforts to increase offering on campus. However, we have to consider what the student wants, what's going to be the student demand. What the student demand for online could maintain or slightly increase. Therefore, revenue for the digital learning fee might decrease by 6% on the fiscal year 22-23, for the fiscal year 23-24, and 24-25, and 1% increase, resulting in a $300,000 decrease for the fiscal year 22-23, and thereafter about $40,000 increase per year. Under the base assumption, should the pandemic or the student desire maintain a more conservative shift to the 60-40, this could lead to a 6% decrease in revenue for the fiscal year 22-23. For the fiscal year 23, flat, and 0.05 increase for the fiscal year 24-25. The financial implication will mirror the optimistic scenarios. Now, when you look at the pessimistic, should enrollment decrease along with a more conservative shift to the 60-40, then we can look at a 12% decrease in revenue for the fiscal year 22-23, 7% decrease for the 23-24, and the fiscal year 24-25. For an approximate reduction of $1.2 million over the course of the next 3 years. When you look at the purchase order rollover, we used to be in the range of $400,000 to $600,000, and And purchase order rollovers are commitment that we have during this fiscal year that go into the next fiscal year. So it used to be $400,000, $600,000. So we never took any of those funds and rolled it over during the course of this fiscal year. Now for the fiscal year 21-22, we have about $2 million that we have a purchase order rollover. So moving forward, we are looking to account for the purchase order rollover from any surplus on a prior year, similarly with the restricted fund in our reserve. As you are aware, we submit our expenditure plan to the Chancellor and get approved, and we look forward to enhance those funds following the Florida statutes. Any question about the revenue side? Right, moving to the expenditure assumption. We engaged with Daryl and our CHCO from Human Resources, who's working on different strategies to enhance our personnel and benefits under the following assumptions. Personnel salary for the optimistic fiscal year 22-23, we include the compensation study changes and the general pay increase from 1% to 3% each year, and minimum wages increase result in about $3.3 million for the course of the next 3 years. When you look on the base, the compensation study change and minimum wage strategies will have been adopted, and a 1% increase represents $630,000 increase in compensation. When you look at the pessimistic, there is a minimum wage increase and no compensation changes, and the increase to about $1 million during the course of the next 3 years. For personal benefits, I would like to remind you that we used to be self-funded before joining the consortium. Under the self-funded, we were projected to do about 10% increase in benefit year over year. We have been able to scale down and looking forward to the human resources strategies to enhance our benefit structure. Based off of the consortium assessment, the average consortium increase is 5.75% every year for the last 5 years. The fiscal year 22-23 increased the overall healthcare cost by 4.4% and the retirement cost by 1%. That becomes effective January 1st of this year. The ancillary benefit plan has a guaranteed rate for the next 3 years with an overall decrease of 9.8%. The following scenario concerning the comprehensive benefits represent the assumed possibility. On the optimistic, based on the fiscal year 22-23, there is an increase of 4.4% to the overall healthcare cost and 1% increase to the retirement cost, resulting in about $700,000 increase. The optimistic 23-24 scenario, there is an increase of 6% and no additional increase to the ancillary, which the overall healthcare cost, it will go to $900,000 increase. For the fiscal year 24-25, there is an increase of 6.85% to the overall healthcare cost with no addition to the ancillary benefits, and there is a slight increase of 0.05 to the retirement cost. Over the course of the 3 years, we will see an increase of about $2.6 million. For the base, it's the same as the optimistic scenario, except for the healthcare cost, which increased 6.4% for the fiscal year 23-24 and for the fiscal year 24-25, for a net fiscal impact of about $2.8 million. On the pessimistic, the retirement benefit increased by 1% each year. There is no additional to the ancillary cost. Healthcare costs increased to 4.4% for the 22-23, 6.4% for the 23-24, and 7.1% for the fiscal year 24-25, for a possible fiscal impact of about $3 million. Any question about the expenditures right now? If you don't have any questions, I would like to thank everybody that helped us to put this together. I think it takes a village to get the ship going into the right direction. And at this time, I would like to welcome Mr. Mike May, who's going over the relevant financial data.
Thank you, Hector. Good morning to Bidwell from Trustees. Okay. Next, we're going to take a look at key performance indicators and how SPC compares to higher education industry benchmarks. The first indicator is the primary reserve ratio, and this benchmark for this ratio is greater than 40%, and SBC's primary reserve ratio for fiscal year 2021 came in at 51%. For comparative purposes, 3 years ago it was just 37%, and over the next 3 years, our goal will be to maintain an over 40% ratio. This ratio measures financial strength by comparing expendable net assets to total expenses and provides a snapshot of financial health and flexibility by indicating how long the institution could function using its current expendable reserves without relying on additional assets generated by operations. The college has made significant changes over the past several years to right-size our reserve, providing stabilization and flexibility to move forward with institutional strategies and initiatives, and provides a direct correlation with the changes that have been instituted over the last few years. All right, next we have the current ratio.
Excuse me, Mike, before we go, I just want to mention on this one. So, as the Board of Trustees, this is the ratio that you probably want to have the most focus on, and this really tells the strength of the college. And you see almost like a 15% increase from 5 years ago. What I also want to mention in this is, I mentioned how 5 years ago we were focusing on strengthening and really building this up. But then as we talk about innovation, this is where we want to continue to maintain a healthy over the 40%, but this number may stay around the same or dip a little bit as we invest into ourselves in the next 3 years.
Correct. And as you can see, we, in the last 5 years, this past fiscal year was the first time we actually hit the benchmark, so that's a very positive sign. The next ratio we're looking at is the current ratio, and this measures liquidity, and it's calculated by taking current assets over total current liabilities. SBC's current ratio at June 30, 21 came in at 2.78, which means for every dollar of liability coming in, there's $2.78 to pay for it. The higher education target rate is at least 2.0, so SBC does exceed this benchmark, and for the next 3 years, the goal is to maintain a target rate above that benchmark. Next, we're going to take a look at our debt ratio. This ratio measures the extent of an institution's leverage and is defined as the ratio of total debt to total assets, and is considered the proportion of an institution's assets that are financed by debt. SBC's debt ratio at June 30, 21 came in at 4.7%. And for fiscal year 21-22, we have refinanced our bonds at a better rate, and the college has also paid off the All States Center chiller plant, which was approximately $1.4 million. And these things will continue to move the needle of our debt ratio. Over the next 3 years, we are projected to be about 3%, assuming no additional debt. And just for comparison purposes, SBC's debt ratio 4 years ago was 7.7%, so we continue to see that decline. Next, we have our capitalization ratio. And this ratio measures the financial flexibility of the institution by not only looking at the current period's return on net assets, but also the accumulated return from previous periods as well. The ratio is calculated by taking net assets and dividing them by total assets. And SBC's capitalization ratio came in at 56%. The higher education target rate is actually less than 50%, so we are slightly over the benchmark. SBC is somewhat heavily invested in property and buildings, but as we move forward to right-size our real estate footprint, this ratio should fall within the benchmark over the next 3 years. The next key indicator is our gross tuition contribution ratio. As you can see, the higher education target rate is less than 60%. SBC actually came in at 29%, and with the expected enrollment challenges over the next 3 years, this ratio will likely stay in the 25 to 30% range.
And I just want to note, so last year our percentage was 41.6. The change is really based on the enrollment decline, and we receive more funding for like loss of revenue and things like this. This will be interesting to kind of watch over the next 3 years, because the more entrepreneurial you are, the more this impacts this ratio. And I'm just kind of curious to see how the benchmark will change as the state and higher education institutions lean more towards entrepreneurial practices. But this is where we are now, and we expect next year, with this current fiscal year, we'll be aiming to get the report next year. We'll
probably be, as we said, similar around that 30% because, again, of the shift between some of the enrollment decline with some of the other funds that supplement.
Which is exactly why I put the 25 to 30% range. Didn't want it to narrow us too much. Okay, up next we have the age of facilities ratio, and this measures the average age of total plant facilities. This ratio measures the relationship between current depreciation to total accumulated depreciation. It provides a sense of the age of facilities and the potential need for considerable future resources to be invested in the plant to cover deferred maintenance, our favorite topic. SPC's age of facilities ratio came in at June 30, 21 at 15.24 years. And over the next 3 years, this ratio will likely slightly increase due to our aging buildings. And the higher education target rate is actually less than 14 years, so we'll look at that. And the last indicator, I believe, is deferred maintenance obligation. SPC's total outstanding deferred maintenance requirement at June 30, 21 was approximately $3.8 million of total expendable assets. This ratio computes to 3.3% of total expendable net assets and compares to $2.9 million last year. So we've had a pretty significant increase in this area. With aging buildings, as you all know, comes continued maintenance, and we would expect this ratio to continue to increase over the next 3 years. Are there any questions on any of the key indicators?
Well, the good news is this shows a sign of a very healthy institution, strictly from a ratio standpoint, and this is a direct correlation to the work that you all have put in our staff, and our faculty, and administrators over the last few years. Obviously, going back to the assumptions over the next 3 years, there's going to be a lot of question marks coming up and potential unknowns. And if we can maintain a relatively balanced budget over the next year and a half to 2 years, we look to be in a very strong position to come out on the other side. But this is great news to look at the ratios and the health of the school.
A couple technical questions. When you, first of all, I echo what Trustee Stonecipher said, but when we talk about the higher education target rate, how is that defined? Is that state colleges, all higher ed? Where does that come from? It's all higher ed.
So it can be a little bit misleading
Okay.
because it throws in universities as well. It also includes private, so this is kind of an all-inclusive.
Okay.
I have yet to find a really good just state college type of benchmarking. But actually, that would be a great thing for us to try and get together with the other state colleges, because it's great to see the higher education benchmarks, but it would be also kind of good information to be able to compare to the state colleges as well.
Sure. Then my second question, looking at the debt ratio, and going back to our real estate question, I don't know that in the past 4 years since I've been on the board, I've seen, I'm sure maybe I have, so I don't want to imply that it was not provided. I don't recall remembering the information relative to what our bonding capacity is compared to our debt ratio and what the standards would be. And I think as we're entering into this real estate conversation, that would be important. By my essence, is not somebody who's going to encourage us going out and securing bonds for a bunch of investments. However, I think that as part of the conversation, it's an important piece of that puzzle to know where our debt lies, what our bonding capacity is, what our bond rating is, and can we capitalize on that, not looking... Anyway, I just think that would be an important part, because I think as a board and as a state institution, we may be tied. It's not as if we're going to borrow for arbitrage or anything like that, but there may be choices that we're making when we're looking at investments that would be helpful. So
Sure. And just to give you a little background, our current situation with the debt is our bonds balance is about $13.4 million at the end of June 30 last year. That's broken down on a balance sheet from current within 12 months versus long term. And then I think we have capital leases of about $2.2 million. And then, of course, we have the installment purchase for the All-State Center chiller plant, which we just recently paid that off, of $1.4 million. So that was part of our spending plan that we drew down some of those excess funds from last year.
Sure. Wake up.
Yes, Trustee Gibbons.
Thank you, Trustee Cole. I had that on my list. I was waiting till the end of some things I'd like to see added, so we have that brought over to you in the county this moment because of the long-term plan. Like, we need to know whether we're mistaken.
All right, next we're going to take a look at the college's investment policies. As you can see by the chart, our investment returns have significantly dropped in 2021, basically due to the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates at almost zero. The college is invested in three primary instruments, one being the Florida Prime Investment Pool, administered by the State Board of Administration, or SBA. Secondly, the State Treasury Special Purpose Investment Account, or SPIA. And number three is the Certificates of Deposit. Both the SBA and Prime are considered cash equivalent investments and can be liquidated in 24 hours to cover our operating expenses, while the CDs are, of course, time restricted deposits and used primarily in our auxiliary fund. All three of these instruments are in alignment with state statutes. All right, next we're going to take a look at our auxiliary fund and facility leases. Per the chart below, auxiliary revenues increased 7.2% over prior year, which is mostly attributable to the loss of revenue recovery provided by HERF funding. And as expected, facility lease revenues declined due to the pandemic for obvious reasons. The college continues to pursue additional forms of auxiliary income to bring services to our students and create additional revenue to support our mission. Examples implemented over the last couple of years include the First Aid Program with Barnes & Noble, which has increased bookstore commission revenue and provided students with up to 60% on textbooks. In addition, the college partnered with WEPA to provide paid-for-print equipment on campus and in libraries. And the college is currently implementing a managed parking garage partnership in our downtown parking garage, which would provide an additional auxiliary revenue stream. Lease revenue will be part of the facility master plan analysis to align with the college's goals and initiatives. Next, we're going to take a look at capital construction. I'm not going to spend any time on this because, as you saw by the previous presentation, this is a very important analysis that is being done, and right-sizing our physical footprint is extremely important to the college, and so we will just kind of move on further. Lastly, we're going to take a look at the college's net pension liability. As of June 30, 2021, the college's proportionate share of the net liabilities totaled $83.5 million. Pension expense can vary from year to year and have a significant impact on the college's financial condition and the financial ratios reported. The pension liabilities are owned by the state of Florida retirement system and are reported in separate audited comprehensive annual financial reports of the Division of Retirement. Governmental accounting regulations require the college to report its proportionate share of this liability on the college's financial statements, but the liability will ultimately be paid out from the state of Florida retirement system. That is our 3-year financial plan presentation. We'll be happy to take any additional questions.
I have a comment, Mr. Chair. Excellent report, great job done. Thank you to the staff, folks, and the administration for putting this together. It really has shown the financial. I'll say my other comments for the president.
Say that again?
I'll say my other comments for the president, not directed to the staff.
Oh, all right.
Somebody else may have.
Vice Chair Buzz. I wanted to also offer kudos, and I know we're getting into some tough conversations, and I want to be sure, especially to the audience who may be watching, this is because we're doing so well, right? And so once you're not trying to plug the hole in the boat, you can figure out how to actually to move forward. And this is really indicative of the work. I mean, when I joined the board at the same time as Dr. Williams, we did not have a college-wide strategic plan. We didn't have zero-based budgeting. We didn't have a long-term financial outlet, and we certainly weren't looking at KPIs for finance. So I just congratulations to you all, and I want to just reiterate that these conversations are taking the college from being excellent and great to being premier and world class, which is where I know all of the five of us and Dr. Williams know we can get. So thank you.
I have one more comment. Sure, that's okay. Dr. Williams, this is a great report. I think it's a great first step to getting the help of the college. I think it's the right step in terms of the financial piece. I would ask you to think about it from this perspective, that we are your temporary equity partners, and you will be giving us an update like every year on how we can make profits, because that's what people that investors do. So quarterly you get profits. We make money this way, we don't make money this way. So these are the things that I would ask that you really think about as we move forward to add to this report. The bonding issue, the capacity for bonding, Trustee Cole already spoke to. The internal and external existential threats. What are those threats? Internal to the organization and externally, that would be threats to us moving forward over the next 5 years, and how we will respond to those if they happen. This is what we have to do in our daily lives as business people. We have to say, what are the things that could put us out of business, and how would we respond to them, right? Or a 100-year pandemic happens. What do we do, right? Which, I'd be lying to tell you, I believe most people did not know that was coming. They didn't know why they didn't. But we should be thinking about that now as a result of we've actually lived through that. We know some of the things that could happen. The other thing is, how do our customers perceive us, and who are our customers over the next 5 years? That evolves and changes on a regular basis.
So with the customer piece, we've done that as we did the work for our strategic plan, and we did the work for the fundraiser. We're getting ready to do the campaign. We did do the work on who our customers are. We do know as a cabinet what our internal threats are, and I'll be happy to share that with the board, but we do know what those are. And we are looking at more of the external threats. So I think it's just something the board, in the operation of the day-to-day, we deal with that on a regular. But we'll bring that back to the board on the internal and external.
Next year. I'm not saying do that now. I'm saying next year. Because what that does is, just like those threats, it allows us to be able to make a confident decision on things that you're saying 3 years out you want to do.
Got it.
You don't have to bring that back to us now. I'm saying add it to this report so that we have the financial health, we know externally what's going on, and because that cutback could change. Like you said,
it does change.
You said, we're trying to respond to this customer now. The other thing you should put in there is, who's your customer 5 years from now as technology evolves? And how do you serve them 10 years from now, right? We may not be here, but we should still be preparing the organization. One of the biggest things that I've seen over 20 years is that we have had good leaders at the helm as president, but we haven't done this exercise to prepare for a Tanja Williams 5 years from now coming in, right? So hence the whole thing you had to go through and cutting $17 million out of the budget and still survive, right?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of forethought that we as a board would like to help and make positive decisions so that you can set us up in the future
For the
to be able to
future.
do those things.
That makes sense.
And then, and what's our biggest need and impact countywide? You talked about the college, well, the state not paying for certain jobs and degree tracks for certain jobs. We need to figure out just that. How do we make the biggest impact? And remember, this kind of trickles over into the customer thing. Sometimes the biggest impact is how do we respond to the people in the marketplace that need our students or people that are graduating. But how do we respond to them? What are we doing to respond to that customer? Right? So you got to think out of the box in terms of saying, all right, nursing. I'm using this as an example, so don't get mad at me. Are we going to have one health campus or are we going to have three? Right? So that we can meet the needs south, Bay County, and north. Right? And do we have one partner as in daycare, or do we have 5 partners? Right? So that's the kind of stuff that I'm saying to you. And what is our... Give us something that you can actually evaluate and see the valuation. And so example is, we may not produce our ends. We may be producing specialty things for this particular hospital for all children, right? Or Orlando Health. Or we may say, this is our specific thing. We're going to do that well and better than anybody else. Because what I start to see is we're trying to compete with, and I'm not saying we as the college, I'm saying businesses as a whole, try to compete with competitors, and sometimes we don't need to do that in certain areas. For example, the privates are doing a different thing. They're doing nursing, they're doing some of the same stuff, but when they leave there, they're at $80,000 leaving out the door in debt. Right? So if that's what somebody wants to do, to take an easier track and be an $80,000 debt, have you really won? You see what I'm saying? Have they really gotten themselves in a better position? So I say all that to say, you see those things added, and just to a brain tease for you to think about long term as a leader, because you're our leader too. Don't get me wrong. You're not just their leader, you're our leader too. And the more information that you pour into us will definitely help us make better decisions.
Well, I definitely need to pour it. We have it. Everything you asked for. No, everything you asked for, we have worked through. We have, when you talked about, do you want to work with 5 hospitals? Do you want to meet the needs of our workforce? And do you want to tailor programs? Our Surge Tech program is a tailored program. And the Duke Energy line worker, that was tailored. And we have a lot more, Valentia, that you're working on now. So we are tailoring, and we're also working with our workforce partners to see what's needed. And we are going to have to make, Board of Trustees, the tough decisions on the legacy programs that have been here a long time, but they're not yielding to high wage paying jobs, and the enrollment may not be favorable, and we'll have to make those decisions. But I do need to do and will do a better job informing the board of those pieces, because everything that Trustee Gibbons mentioned, minus the bonding piece, I don't know that info, but we'll get that, we are doing. Those are the things that at the table we're talking through, and not just talking, but we have things in the hopper now that we need to make sure you guys know that we are working on to meet those workforce needs, and then bring the rationale behind the decisions so you can understand these are the things that we use as high priority reasons for making such decisions. But in this world right now for higher ed, and you heard our presenters talk about flexibility, but if we're not innovative and flexible and not willing to change or move, we will not grow this institution. I would love to sit down and be the same institution as we were when I started in 1987. But if we were, we would not be here. And so change and flexibility is critical. That's why we use the word innovation, innovate, create. We've got to be uncomfortable and be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And making those changes. And so those are the things that Matthew and I have been working on with the deans. The provost will be heavily involved in what programs are still the ones to keep and what programs are no longer being funded and we can't find outside funding for that to supplement. And I continue to say that because we've talked about it for a couple of years before the state is mandated. Now it's mandated. So it's not a conversation, it's an action, something that we have to move on. But Trustee Gibbons, thank you for that. And I know that we caught and captured all those comments from today. So I hope that we bring those on Wednesday. So this is good.
Trustee Cole talked about being a premier organization.
Yeah.
Premier organizations know who they are.
Absolutely.
They don't try to be someone else. We're not trying to be anybody else.
Exactly.
You're our leader. And those are the things that will allow us to continue to be premier because we are thinking outside the box, but also long term.
Gotcha.
Any other comments? Good. Well, thank you all for coming and the exchange of ideas. I love to hear it. Trustee Gibbons, the passion always comes through, which I appreciate, and the ideas and the exchange. I think they said the real estate team is meeting with some of the provosts in the next month or so. So look forward to hearing some of that feedback. I hope you all provide your ideas to those folks so it enables us to make good decisions and really know what's needed. So thank you all, and with that, the meeting is adjourned.
So we have a check presentation in the entranceway. We need the board. Okay.
Vitamin D every day. I've got it.
And that was supposed to start at 11? Okay. I'm ready. Okay. Well, we're getting ready to get $1 million check.